With the local campaign period now officially in full swing, it is time once more for Publicus to provide the Filipino people with updates on the state of the race for mayor and vice mayor in all 17 Metro Manila cities. I'm Relly Sinsuat, Executive Director of Publicus, and welcome to the fourth episode of the PAHAYAG Election Report, where we will reveal the results of our March 16 to 21 NCR Tracker Survey. NCR Tracker March is part of our PAHAYAG 2022 Election Survey Series, which aims to provide the general public with the latest data on the state of the race as we approach Election Day on May 9. This program is brought to you in cooperation with our media partner, the Manila Times. Together, we hope to spark greater political participation and engagement among Filipino voters, especially the youth, in pursuit of record-high voter turnout in the upcoming polls. Between March 16 to 21, 2022, Publicus asked 1,648 registered Filipino voters residing in Metro Manila who they would vote for mayor or vice mayor in their respective cities. Our survey included 100 respondents from each NCR city, except for Pateros, where only 48 respondents were drawn due to sampling constraints. The members of our purposive survey panel were randomly selected from the research panel marketplace of 200,000 Filipinos maintained by PureSpectrum, a US-based panel marketplace with a multinational presence. Parameters based on respondent age, gender, and location were also utilized in the sample formulation in order for the resulting sample to conform more closely to the features of the voting population as defined by statistics from the Commission on Elections. Samples provided by PureSpectrum are not affiliated with any bias or political party. All opinions voiced in the interpretation and analysis of the data are those of the writer or project sponsor. The margin of error for this survey is 10% at the city level and 14% for the municipality of Pateros. Before we move on to the results, please take time to like and share this video and to subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay up to date on the latest data on the May 2022 elections. To make the results a little easier to process, we have grouped the mayoral and vice mayoral races into three tiers based on the relative level of competition observed from the survey data. The first tier is composed of what we consider to be landslide races so far, where the first place candidate enjoys a comfortable lead over the competition. The second tier is for competitive races, wherein the first place candidate enjoys a statistically significant lead outside of the 10% margin of error, but the data suggests that there is still ample room for the other candidates to catch up. The third tier is made up of the hotly contested battlegrounds, where two or more candidates are statistically tied for first place within the 10% margin of error. First, we will discuss the vice mayoral results. The vice mayoral races in Mandaluyong, Valenzuela, and Makati are shaping up to be landslides for the favorites. Incumbent Mandaluyong Mayor Menchi Abalos, now running unopposed for vice mayor, earned 73% of the vote among her city's respondents. Valenzuela Vice Mayor Lori Natividad Borja received 63% of the vote, which is a significant 15-point drop from her 78% vote share in our February survey. However, Natividad Borja still leads the race by a comfortable 47% margin. Makati Vice Mayor Monique Lagdameo continues to lead her re-election bid with a vote share of 54%. Moving on, 5 vice mayoral races in NCR fall into the competitive tier. In Las Piñas, April Aguilar Neri remains ahead with a vote share of 44%. Almost 1 out of 3 Las Piñas respondents, however, are still undecided about their vice mayoral vote. In Navotas, Cap Tito Sanchez leads with a vote share of 46%, although the 31% undecided voter demographic could impact his position in the race. Boyet Ding del Rosario received 35% of the vote from Pasay respondents, but more than 1 out of 3 respondents are still undecided. Dodot Jaworski maintains his lead for the vice mayoral position in Pasig with 40% of the vote. However, 30% of Pasig respondents are also undecided. San Juan Vice Mayor Warren Villa is leading his re-election bid with 46% of the vote, However, the 28% of undecided voters could still impact the race. Interestingly, 9 out of 17 vice mayoral races in NCR appear to be hotly contested battlegrounds based on our March data. Caloocan remains to be a battleground as vice mayoral aspirants Councilor Karina Te and PJ Malonzo are statistically tied for first place with 35% and 28% of the vote respectively. In Malabon, the vice mayoral race is a dead heat between JJ Yambao at 41% and incumbent Vice Mayor Ninong de la Cruz at 37%. Raymond Bagaching's vote share has jumped up to 41% in the Manila vice mayoral race. Congressman Yul Siervo Nieto earned 22% of the vote, just barely inching into a statistical tie for first place. 1 out of 4 voters are still undecided on whom to vote as vice mayor of the nation's capital, which means it's still anyone's race at this point. In Marikina, Doc Marion Andres received 32% of the vote for vice mayor, followed by Sherwin de la Cruz at 16%. This puts them in a statistical tie for first according to the 10% margin of error. The vice mayoral race in Quezon City has also tightened, with incumbent Vice Mayor Gian Soto and former Congressman Winnie Castelo statistically tied for first at 40% and 30% respectively. Taguig is in a similar position with Arvin Alit and Janelle Serafica statistically tied for first place as well. It's anyone's race in Muntinlupa, with Vice Mayor Artemio Simundak at 37 points and Oyo Boy Dioko close behind at 33%. The Pateros vice mayoral election is also a dead heat between Carlos Santos at 37.5% and John Peter Marzan at 35.4%. Last but certainly not least, the vice mayoral race in Parañaque appears to be completely up for grabs. Undecided is leading all candidates at 32%. Tess de Asis, John Villafuerte, and Coach Binky Favis are all statistically tied for both first and last place. Now, onto the mayoral races. There are fewer competitive mayoral races according to our polling data, with 7 out of 17 races falling into the landslide tier. 92% of PAHAYAG respondents said they support the re-election bid of Mayor Vico Soto, the same exact figures as his February numbers. He leads incumbent Vice Mayor Ayo Caruncho Bernardo by 89 points, the largest margin among all 34 Metro Manila races tested on our survey. In Valenzuela, Congressman Wes Gatchalian maintained his huge lead in the mayoral race, earning a vote share of 86%. San Juan Mayor Francis Zamora and Taguig Representative Lani Cayetano are also ahead in their respective mayoral bids at 76%. Re-electionist mayors Aiki Ponce of Pateros, Abby Binay of Makati, and Marcy Teodoro of Marikina are also leading their respective bids for an additional term quite comfortably, with vote shares above 60%. Meanwhile, there are 6 mayoral races falling within the competitive tier. In Las Piñas, Mayor Imelda Aguilar leads a 7-way race with 41% of the vote, but the 23% of undecided respondents could have an impact on the race moving forward. The Mandaluyong mayoral race has tightened, with the lead of former Mayor Benjamin Abalos Sr. shrinking from 58 points in February to just 33 points in March. Second placer Florencio Solomon more than doubled his vote share from 6% in February to 20% in March. Muntinlupa Representative Rufy Biazon leads the mayoral race in his city with 49% of the vote. But the choices down the road of the 24% undecided could make the race more interesting. In Navotas, Representative John Ray Tiangco holds a statistically significant lead over RC Cruz, 55% to 22%. However, with a margin of error of 10%, the 15% of undecided voters may come into play. Parañaque Congressman Eric Olivares leads with 53% of the vote in his city's mayoral race, but the high proportion of undecided respondents at 26% could also leave an element of uncertainty. The race is similar in Pasay, where incumbent Mayor Emmy Calixto Rubiano holds a statistically significant lead of 39% of the vote. However, exactly 1 out of 4 respondents are still undecided. Finally, we move on to the most compelling data from our March survey regarding the 4 battleground cities for mayor in Metro Manila. The race in Caloocan moved from competitive tier into the battleground tier on our March survey, with frontrunner Congressman Along Malapitan shedding 20% of his vote share to lesser-known rivals. Now polling at 32% in March, Malapitan is statistically tied with Congressman Egay Arise, whose 20% vote share in March is in line with his 22% share in February. Malabon Councilor Enzo Oreta and former Vice Mayor Jeannie Sandoval are neck and neck in the mayoral race, statistically tied for first place with 46% and 37% of the vote, respectively. In Manila, Vice Mayor Hani Lacuna registered a significant decrease in voter preference for mayor, down from 44% in February to 32% in March. She is now statistically tied for first place with Christy Lim at 15% and Amado Bagaching at 13%. Significantly, 25% of Manila respondents are still undecided about their mayoral vote. This indicates that the race for mayor in Manila at this point is a free-for-all. Finally, Quezon City has become a major battleground, with incumbent Mayor Joy Belmonte polling at 40% in March, down from 57% in February. With Congressman Mike Defensor now polling at 24%, Belmonte and Defensor are now statistically tied for first place at the 10% margin of error. The 17% undecided QC voters in our sample could have tipped the race in either direction. Joining us now to provide more insights into our March survey results is the Chief Data Scientist and pollster of PUBLiCUS, Dr. David Barua Yap Jr. Good day, David, and thank you so much for joining us here again today.
Ahoy!
Now, David, before we go deeper into the results, I think it would be necessary for us to explain for our viewers how exactly to interpret our March survey results, considering the relatively high margin of error of 10%. So, David, how would you explain this to everyone joining us today?
So, admittedly, the NCR tracker is indeed limited by its sample size of 100 and, of course, around 50 for Pateros. So, as much as we would like to give each city around 1,000 or so samples, this is prohibitively expensive both in terms of time and money for a non-commissioned survey. Having said that, it is still important to note that with the sample size of 100 and the implied margin of error of 10%, it is still sensitive enough to detect significant shifts in the local political landscape. In a way, it can be viewed as a pressure plate or as a tripwire that, while not as sensitive as, say, something more sophisticated like an infrared or laser warning device, it is still sensitive enough to detect heftier or heavier or weightier shifts.
So, in a sense, David, what you're saying is that we shouldn't look at the exact numbers specifically, but more on how the numbers are moving or how the election is shifting in one direction or another.
Well, in a way, you can still look at the estimates, but with the margin of error of 10%, it would be useful to consider the band that surround the bands that would surround those estimates. So, for example, if you see a number, say at 41, then you don't just say that it's 41. We should be cognizant of the plus minus 10 and consider 31 and 51 as well within the realms of likelihood when it comes to the confidence level of the survey.
Just for a reminder to our viewers, or maybe an example, at a plus or minus 10% margin of error, let's say the number is candidate A has 40% of the vote share on our survey. That means that with the plus or minus 10%, that candidate could have a vote share of up to 50% or as low as 30%. So
Uh,
basically,
just
plus or minus 10%. So
just
just
to
keep that
add,
in mind. Yes,
uh,
David.
just to add, from what Aureli said, that is contingent on the level of confidence. So if we're looking at the level of confidence of 95%, then we are saying that there is a 95% probability that the actual parameter value is contained within, as was in the example, the numbers 31 to 51.
So, David, let's apply what we've discussed about the margin of error and everything. What's been interesting, or what kind of movement have we seen between our February survey and our March survey?
So, looking at both the February and March surveys, it's clear that the local races in NCR, they are becoming more competitive, so to speak. As you mentioned in your report, we now have four hotly contested cities, whereas in the previous survey we had only one. I think that was only Malabon in the previous run. Moreover, if you look at the average margins that separate the average margin that separates first place candidates and second candidates, it declined from 49% to 41%. So that's another marker for increasing competition. Now, this is, of course, to be expected, given that in just or that the local races are only starting to heat up at the moment.
Yeah, actually, the local campaign period just started a couple days ago. So I think the timing of our survey is just right to give everyone a sort of baseline going into the local campaign period. But David, let's move straight into it since you already mentioned our four battlegrounds for mayor. I think everyone is interested in knowing more about the state of these races, especially I think Manila and QC. But maybe let's start it off with what did you see in Caloocan and Malabon?
All right. So as it's for with regards to that question, it's instructive that you referred to these candidates in the way that you did in your report. If you consider Caloocan and Malabon, let's start with Caloocan. You've got Erice versus Malapitan. Now, both of those are incumbent representatives. If you look at Malabon, you've got Oreta versus Sandoval. You've got the relative of the incumbent mayor versus a former vice mayor and also the wife of a former representative. Now, with this in mind, we can see that these can be viewed as heavy hitters. These are not unknowns. These are not new personalities. They have been around the block, so to speak, and they would be expected to have their own in city bailiwicks and support bases. So I would say that this could be this could have been expected given their backgrounds.
So, David, I think we shall take Manila and QC separately because these are the two most populous cities and very influential cities in the Philippines. And it's interesting for them to have very competitive mayoral races. So, let's start first in Manila. Of course, incumbent Vice Mayor Honey Lacuna is now running to replace incumbent Mayor Isko Moreno Dumagoso, who will not be seeking re election as he is seeking the presidency. And this appears to have created a sort of power void or a big opportunity for different names to come in.
So what I found upon closer examination of the candidates running for mayor in Manila, especially the top three candidates, is that all three could actually be viewed as part of dynasties, from incumbent Vice Mayor Lacuna to Amado Bagatsing and to Christy Lim, who is the daughter of former Mayor Alfredo Lim. If any of you are old enough to remember, he was a prominent figure both in national and local politics.
So, how about in Quezon City? Of course, the Belmonte name is very well known and established in Quezon City, and especially in the office of the city mayor. But it appears that Mike Defensor is certainly making things interesting in the Quezon City race.
As a lifelong resident of Quezon City, I can attest to the longevity of the Belmonte family. They have been around for over 20 years, either when you're talking about former Speaker Sonny Belmonte, and of course his daughter, incumbent Mayor Joy Belmonte. So what is happening in Quezon City, I think, is a function of its size. If you consider Quezon City with its 6 districts and its land area, it's quite massive. When you think about a city like that, there would of course be places that are not particularly satisfied with the incumbent and would want or would be more open to an alternative. But then this is where someone like Mike Defensor comes in. Now, if you consider Mike Defensor within the context of the other challengers to the Belmonte dynasty, Mike Defensor emerges as someone who appears to be markedly more prepared and more financially secure in waging a campaign in the massive city.
So, David, you've mentioned that in Caloocan, Malabon, Manila, and Quezon City, it's really a battle of dynasties or a battle of really heavy hitters among the candidates. So, with this in mind, with the local election period now in full effect, what can these candidates do in the respective races in these battlegrounds to pull ahead and come out on top on May 9th?
Well, generally speaking, candidates would now tend towards looking at hammering their message home. So this boils down to not just who has the better or more appealing message, but who has the better message delivery system. So it comes down to that. Then there would also be external factors to consider. If you consider the races in the supposed battleground cities, we see that external influences, such as endorsements from key national figures, would also play a part. I would think that the endorsement, for example, of former Senator Marcos has had a huge effect on the candidacy of Mike Defensor in Quezon City. In the same way, or in a similar way, the explicit and implicit endorsement of Manila Mayor Isko Domagoso is benefiting Vice Mayor Hani Lacuna. So these are factors to consider moving forward as the local campaign season heats up in the coming weeks.
So, David, based on all of the data that you've seen so far from our NCR March and also NCR February tracker, how do you think the race will go as we go closer to May 9? Are things going to tighten even further, or are we going to see candidates pulling away?
I think that in the more competitive cities, we can expect more competition in the coming weeks. So in these cities, just like Kevin Garnett said decades ago, anything is possible.
Okay, well, David, thank you so much for joining us. As always, we love to hear all of your insights on the data. Before you go, maybe you can let our viewers know when they might expect our next batch of survey results.
So we are going to be launching another national tracker. So you can expect those results in 2 weeks, I would think. In at least 2 weeks, we are going to be releasing another set of survey results for our national tracker.
As David has mentioned before, we will be releasing survey data almost nonstop until the end of the campaign period. So, of course, I don't want to take so much of your time, David, but thank you so much for joining us again, and we'll see you when we have our next survey results out.
Thanks as well.
Again, for Publicus, this is Areli Sinsuat, and thank you so much for joining us on the fourth episode of the Pahayag Election Report, where we reported the results of our March 16 to 21 NCR Tracker Survey. To see more, please visit us on Facebook at PUBLiCUS Asia or to our website at publicusasia.com. And of course, we invite you to subscribe here to our YouTube channel. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you again for our next survey results sometime soon. Have a great day, everyone.